Now, this next day was more of a philosophical day when it came to the question that I was wrestling with within yoga. And so it started with this quote: "The art of teaching is tolerance. Humbleness is the art of learning." Every 4 weeks, I take on a new topic to make myself either healthier, wealthier, or wiser. And it's something that I want to capture my experience and provide for you as a gateway to explore each of these topics deeper. And in college, a few years back, I spent a summer in Sweden. And as a born and raised Tennessee boy from the South, there was bound to be some culture shock in this sort of coming of age travel experience over the course of the summer. And I found their love of coffee especially endearing. You know, I generally almost always have a cup of something caffeinated on my desk at any given time. But before arriving in Sweden, locals in the group that I was with encouraged me to take the posture of a learner. And that phrase really resonated with me, and it's something that I explored through that time, and I'll never forget it. And that posture of a learner really showed up in all interactions with people that I was familiar with or people that was brand new. Now, if I approached each experience with humility, I found that if I had an open mind, both I and the locals that I was interacting with would have a better experience all around. And sometimes that showed up as I'm going to what they call fika, which is basically mid-afternoon coffee break, and everyone seems to shut down. It's kind of like a siesta, but instead of taking naps, everyone goes to coffee shops, gets a cup of coffee and pastry, and just chit-chats with friends, which was the best. I suggest you look it up, internalize it, and try to incorporate it into your day-to-day routine, because it was rejuvenating and I loved it. And I just had to be open to that. And maybe it meant that I had a hard time sleeping that night. The sun didn't really go down during the summer in Sweden, but really embracing it, it kind of imprinted on me and affected the way that I approach my day-to-day routine as I came back here. Even years later, I still love to have a nice fika in the afternoon. So how can you integrate the philosophy of yoga, including all the poses, routines, and mantras, into your everyday decision-making and interactions? How can it inform how you interact with the world in a practical, real way? So there's 3 different ways to unpack this, and one is an ethical way. And so in the first approach, the first lens is applying principles such as honesty, integrity, doing no harm, to cultivate a conscious decision-making process. And it really integrates into your decision-making and your personal values. The second lens to look at this and unpack this question is in mindful choices. So the first was ethics and how you approach a question or a decision, and the next way is how you engage with that decision itself. Mindful choices, considering what the potential impact or consequences of your actions or decisions on yourself, on others, on your loved ones, on people that you just met, and fostering a sense of responsibility and compassion in your daily interactions. And this is something that if there was ever a place for this to resonate, it would be on social media. So making mindful choices about what you say, what you promote out there into the world, it's something that it seems to be waning. It seems to be going down in the world on a generalized scale. And so maybe yoga is a way that through this practice and being conscious on the mat can help you make more mindful choices off the mat. Maybe it's at work or at the dinner table or on your cell phone. The third lens is self-reflection, looking internally and regularly examining your thoughts, intentions, and behaviors and making adjustments to align with the ethical principles of yoga. So this is one where really looking at yourself with compassion. I want to really emphasize that compassion part, because it seems like most people today have a lower threshold for being able to care for oneself. And this is a generalized sense. Maybe you do great at this, but generally speaking, a lot of us, including myself, really struggle with honoring oneself compassionately and being able to reflect on oneself in a way that is constructive rather than deconstructive. And so these are all 3 different lenses to really approach this question. I want to hear from you how you can integrate some of these philosophical concepts from on the mat to off the mat in your everyday life. Finally, the ultimate aim of yoga is to reach liberation. That's a quote that I was wrestling with on this final day of this experience. We're in week 3 of a 4-week journey through yoga as I dive deeper into this practice and then hopefully help you approach it. And again, our goal with any of this content that I create is to become more healthy, wealthy, and wise. And people all over the world are certainly being held back from seen and unseen forces. So if you're listening to this, or if you're reading this, or if you're watching this, the oppression that you experience is probably measurably different than it would be 100 years ago. And that's something definitely to be celebrated. Life was harder 100 years ago on average for most people, but it's important not to overlook that everyone's on their own journey of liberation, okay? And I view yoga as one of the many methods available to us to continue further on that journey. That next step, it often starts on the mat. And where you begin your practice each and every day is crucial to your mindset as you get into that practice and where you physically do it. And so it's a big concept, this exploration of freedom and what externally is holding you back. And it's something to really dwell on. The question is, how do you physically create a sacred and intentional space for your yoga practice, whether it's at home or out in public in a studio somewhere? And here's 3 ways to really look at that, 3 lenses to unpack a sacred and intentional space for you. The first is decluttering. This has got to be the most obvious. Clearing a physical space from any distractions and creating an environment that promotes focus and tranquility. And so this is one where, I really was thinking about this. And if you look at the series that I'm following with Yoga with Adriene, her corner of her room that is very minimal, very clean, and has Benji, her dog, there, is something that there's just all these elements that kind of are harmonious. And that harmony is definitely something to be sought after, and something that I would want for myself or anyone else that I was encouraging to go on a 4-week deep dive into yoga with. The second lens to look through is setting intentions. So with this one, establishing a purpose or a theme for each practice session and bringing awareness and mindfulness to the mat. And so when I look at setting intentions, I really think about having a theme. And if it can be a 1-word theme, the simpler, the better. And so that's why I really also appreciate with the program that I'm following. You can check out the link down below and jump right in and follow along with that program with Yoga with Adriene, because she has a 1-word theme for just about every single one of these practices, and even the overarching 30-day experiences as well. So setting your intentions and focusing, and that's why I've created each of these questions and quotes to have something to dwell on, to meditate on, to unpack through the yoga practice. And finally, the third lens is personalization, because this is a personal experience, and adding in elements like a candle to focus on, like we talked about at the beginning of this week, or incense to help focus, your other senses visually, smell, touch, the temperature of the room, the airflow, meaningful objects to infuse the space with. These are all can be potential sacred inlets for personal connection with your own practice. So I encourage you to really dive deep into wherever you are on that spectrum with your own sacred and intentional space for doing yoga, and really use these 3 lenses to help unpack that for yourself.